So I haven't seen War for Planet of the Apes yet, but going by the first two and the reviews and trailer of the third movie, the Planet of the Apes reboot is looking to be one of the best trilogies of all time. I'd say it's up there with Lord of the Rings and the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. That may be kind of weird, but each movie in this series has been an unbroken chain of quality and excellence. They took a movie series that after the first one had, in my view, I've only seen Beneath the Planet of the Apes and I've seen little snippets from some of the later ones, but had basically just completely gone to garbage a while ago. And they took this series and they shined it and they made it into something great. And I love Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I love Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I'm sure I'll love War for Planet of the Apes. And it looks even better than the first two movies. So I'm really psyched. So I figured I'd do a video and just talk a bit about the history of these movies and just a bit about the stories so far. If you want to go watch this movie, I highly recommend going to just finding whatever way, if you have to obtain them or whatever, to see the first two movies because the first two movies are amazing. So the background to the new Planet of the Apes movies, I've only really seen the Charlton Heston original and a bit of the second one. But the background for Planet of the Apes is that there is a virus that devastated humanity and made the apes smart, and that's how the apes were able to take over the world. In essence, eventually there's a war, but it doesn't really come until the third movie. In general, humanity largely wiped itself out, and it has really nothing to do with the apes. Which I think was a good storytelling choice, because if the apes were just slaughtering humanity, that would make them look really unsympathetic, and it would make the movies kind of difficult to watch. But our movie starts off with our main character, Will, played by James Franco, who's working for a San Francisco biotech company, Genesis. There's so many of these evil companies. I forget what the company was in Terminator that made Skynet, but this is kind of like the bio version. Hell, I'll just call them Umbrella for the rest of the video. So they've created a cure for Alzheimer's, ALZ-112. So because it's difficult to genetically engineer somebody who's already alive, because I actually did a project on this back in school. See, if someone's in an embryonic state, there's only one cell, so you can do whatever an egg, you can do whatever you want to the egg, and it's fairly easy. And then once that cell starts to multiply, all the subsequent cells have it. For someone who's already formed, the easiest way to do it is with a virus or bacteria, because the virus will infect the body and put all of the genetic code into every cell in the body. So that's kind of a delivery system for some things, and yeah. So they've developed a Alzheimer's virus that they're going to use to cure Alzheimer's. So it specifically repairs the brain. So they try testing it on a chimp named Bright Eyes, which dramatically increases her intelligence. However, she goes insane, and they kill her and euthanize all the other chimps. The issue, though, was she went insane because it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I can't remember if she was angry that she had her son taken away, or the hormonal imbalance of receiving the virus while giving birth was it. But they take Will takes the baby chimp, who he names Caesar. So he learns that Caesar inherited his mother's intelligence. So Will introduces Caesar to the redwood forest nearby, and Caesar immediately takes the trees. Meanwhile, Will steals a canister of the drug, and he gives it to his father, who has dementia. And it restores his cognitive ability. In fact, it makes him smarter than he was before. So then we cut to 5 years later, and Caesar has reached adolescence, and he is walking around, and he sees a dog on a leash like his own, because Will has him on a leash in public. So he questions Will and learns about the whole... So his father becomes resistant to the virus, and his dementia returns. So if I recall, Charles's father is running around getting into fights or something, and the next door neighbor is like getting into a scuffle with him, and Caesar attacks the man, attacks the guy, so he gets taken away and put in an ape refuge. So he's treated cruelly by Draco Malfoy. Yeah, Draco Malfoy's in this movie. So Caesar beat up the neighbor because the neighbor was in a scuffle with the father whose dementia came back. So Caesar's in an ape refuge, and he meets a bunch of other apes there. And he realizes that he's kind of unique, that all the other apes are not smart, that they can't really relate to him. I mean, he can communicate with them a little, but overall he feels completely isolated. So at the chimp shelter, he gets beat up by Rocket, who's the chief ape at the refuge. Caesar uses his intelligence, though, in combination with a couple other of the apes, to overthrow Rocket and become the alpha of the sanctuary. Meanwhile, the evil company Umbrella has developed an improved version of the drug in gas form. So he takes the drug home to try to treat his father, but his father rejects it. He says, "Look, I don't want to take the drug anymore. I've had a good life. I'm just going to die." So Charles dies overnight. So they test the drug on a bonobo named Koba, and it works. However, one of the scientists becomes exposed to it and becomes ill. So he attempts to warn Will about the virus, and as he's leaving, he sneezes blood on the next door neighbor, who turns out to be an air pilot. That's a bad sign. So why they had kind of developed a stronger version of the virus was the virus was just not strong enough for long-term usage in humans, so they made it more powerful. Now the issue is apes have a much stronger immune system than humans. So the new version of the virus is strong enough to make apes strong, make apes intelligent, but it's not strong enough to actually harm the ape. Whereas with a human being, it's strong enough to destroy them, and it's highly infectious because it's designed to be that way. Because when they thought it only had beneficial effects, because it only had beneficial effects in the apes, they wanted it to spread. They wanted it to spread as much as possible. So Caesar escapes from the facility and goes to Will's house. He steals a canister of the drug and returns, and he releases the drug into the facility, which increases the intelligence of the other apes. When Draco Malfoy attempts to get them back into the cage, he yells the infamous line, get your hands off me, you damn dirty ape." So Caesar actually speaks for the first time and says no, and then unintentionally electrocutes them to death. So the apes free the facility and rescue the remaining chimps from Umbrella, and save a bunch of apes from the San Francisco Zoo. So the ape army fights their way past a police blockade on the Golden Gate Bridge and escape into the Redwood Forest. One of the apes sacrifices himself to save Caesar by jumping in front of the helicopter. Now I have to say, it's an amazing scene when they're on the bridge, because it's I've never really seen anything like it. You got the apes fighting, you got the gorillas with their super strength. I know it's not like a superpower. Gorillas are just much stronger than humans. But there's just a lot of really creative combat between the apes and the humans as it goes. So they take down a helicopter. Koba kills somebody. So the apes succeed in escaping to the Redwood. However, Will, the scientist guy we mentioned earlier, shows up and he begs Caesar to come home with him. In response, Caesar hugs him and says Caesar is home. Will, realizing it's their last goodbye, says farewell to Caesar and leaves the apes to embrace their lifestyle in the forest. However, the next door neighbor carries the disease on an airplane, and soon the entirety of the world is infected with it. Presumably the virus spreads throughout the world. Maybe some other apes in other countries also become infected with it. But you have a sizable community of apes who have succeeded in escaping into the forest. So it's what can be said about the first Planet of the Apes movie? Caesar is a great protagonist. Andy Serkis does a truly amazing job. Um, Caesar has a ton of charisma. He really does kind of embody his name. He makes a lot of kind of grand gestures, kind of like, the populist man of the people, symbol of strength thing. The whole concept of him being the alpha male is frequently referenced throughout the movies, and just kind of displays of dominance and submissiveness and kind of a social context go on throughout it. It should be noted that the apes are pretty non-violent in general. What the apes basically want is they just want to be left alone, and they want to develop their own civilization with no influence from humans. Because they believe that, rightly so, that since they broke out of the city, that they'll be hunted down, and that humanity will blame them for the virus. So, in between the events, so that's largely what Caesar is doing. It should be noted the apes don't really attempt to take revenge. I think Koba takes revenge because they did really nasty experiments on him, and he's like permanently scarred. But by and large, there was like no attempt by the apes to hurt innocent people. If anything, they tried to avoid civilian casualties. All they really wanted was to escape confinement with their brothers and go kind of live in the woods. So it's kind of funny. It's also kind of funny when people try to compare the apes to like the riots that happened, to kind of like Dindu riots and stuff like that. Just because the apes aren't really like that. The apes are very peaceful. They have very stable families, and they have a very strong sense of community. As we'll see in the next movie, their key rule of their society is ape doesn't harm ape. Caesar very much promotes the idea that the apes are a nation, a small nation, but a nation, and that they're an extended family. And as an extended family, they have a duty to one another. A duty to preserve and advance their people, a duty, if you will, to secure a future for apes and ape children. It does seem in the sequels that the apes are monogamous and they lead fairly morally upstanding lives. They just are a different species. They're just different species, and like I said, they want to develop without human influences. So because they kind of take this perspective, it's kind of the old pan-nationalism thing. The apes can kind of have their region in the redwoods, and they can develop their civilization. And humans can have their civilization elsewhere, and they can kind of leave each other alone and coexist. Which is, I think, what a lot of people ultimately just want, is to be left alone with their own people. And just kind of develop in their own way. But as we'll see in the next movie in this franchise, that option is not left up to the apes. And that's ultimately what kind of leads to the war and to the devastating consequences, is that diversity is chasing the last ape down. And so that being said, let's go to the second movie, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Okay, so now we have the second movie of the trilogy, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. So after the events of the first movie, Caesar and his band have established the beginnings of their own civilization. They have kind of a village on the side of a cliff, and they raise their young there. They think they teach their children to read. By and large, they're pretty happy. So Caesar is their leader. So Caesar's son Blue Eyes and his friend encounter a man in the woods. The man panics and shoots Ash, hurting him. So then a bunch of apes show up on horses, if I recall. I forget if they're on horses yet. Anyways, so they show up and drive the humans off. Caesar yells at them and tells them to leave their land. So the humans go back to San Francisco, and it's found that the remainder of humanity in the city has developed a fortress around the tower, which is a partially finished skyscraper. So Koba, who is kind of challenging Caesar for a position of alpha of the tribe, suggests that they make a show of force to tell the humans they mean business. Makes sense. So Caesar leads a huge army of apes to the tower, and they just kind of show up and and just kind of make a display. And Caesar says the apes do not want war, but if attacked, they will defend their home and demand that humans don't stay in his territory. So the human from earlier convinces the leader of the humans to give him time to take a small team to the forest to reconcile with the apes and to try to get a hydroelectric dam working, because that could provide long-term power to the city. So yeah, they won't leave the apes alone, and you see how this will work. So Caesar makes what I consider a fair deal. Caesar's like, okay, we don't have any use for electricity. You can come in, work on the dam, get it running, but you have to give us your guns. You have to surrender all guns when you come in, which I think is fair. So things are going okay. They're starting to trust each other, but then Caesar discovers one of the humans had hidden a gun, and Caesar gets pissed off about this and kicks the humans out. He decides to let them stay for. So while this whole thing is going on, the leader of the humans finds a U.S. armory and it begins to arm his people. Koba, who's spying on them, discovers the armory and kills 2 guards and stealing an assault rifle. So he goes back home and tells Caesar that Caesar loves the apes, humans more than he loves apes. So Caesar beats the shit out of him to show that he's still dominant. Then Koba shoots him with the assault rifle. So Koba does that to make it look like a human did it. He also sets the village on fire, making it look like the humans are attacking. So Koba takes charge and claims that the humans were behind it. So he leads them into San Francisco, where they plunder the armory and charge the tower. So the apes breach the building and imprison the humans. When one of the apes refuses to kill the humans because they're unarmed, Koba kills Ash and imprisons all the apes still loyal to Caesar. Keep in mind, the first commandment of the apes is ape does not harm ape. It's kind of the most basic part of their philosophy. So to kill another ape over a dispute with humans like that is very off. Is a sin in their society. So Caesar is alive and comes back to his former home in San Francisco. Caesar reveals that Koba shot him, and Caesar realizes that apes can be as bad as humans. So he kind of gains a little bit of pathos towards humans. And I guess he kind of realizes that the utopia he was trying to build is not going to go exactly the way he wants. So Caesar's son goes and meets with his father and frees the apes who were imprisoned. So the apes. So while this is all going on, so Caesar's son's freeing the humans and the other apes who are held hostage. It turns out that because the electricity was activated, they were able to turn on a radio and make contact with a military base that had survived, and that the army's sending in a full-scale assault to take out the apes. So Koba, gone insane, starts shooting at the apes, and Caesar's tackles him off a ledge. Koba is, the classic scene where the one guy is clinging like on for dear life and the other guy is like standing there, and he has the choice of reaching down and lifting him up or throwing him down into the abyss. Koba goes, "Ape does not hurt ape. Help me because I'm ape." And Caesar coolly remarks, "You are not ape," and lets him fall to his death. Because Koba betrayed the tribe. He betrayed the apes nation, and he dies a traitor's death. So a surviving human and Caesar acknowledge their friendship, and Malcolm warns of the approaching human military. Caesar states that humans will never forgive the apes for what Koba did, and that this will result in total war. All the apes kneel before Caesar as he begins to prepare for the war that's going to come. So this leads us to the third movie, War for the Planet of the Apes, in which humanity and the apes will duke it out for, I guess, rulership of what's left of the Earth. So It's kind of an interesting movie from a lot of for a lot of different reasons. Firstly, once again, you have this concept of pan nationalism, the idea that the apes just want to be left alone and pursue their own society. Koba's vengefulness isn't so much from imperialism as it is a desire for revenge and a mistrust of humans, who frankly gave him every reason to hate and mistrust them. That's certainly true. But because of kind of this, because of a false flag attack, you have two sides that could have probably coexisted peacefully heading into a total war. And you have traitors on both sides that led to it, which is kind of an issue we have a lot in the current crisis. But on top of that, I didn't really talk about these much as movies, but there's amazing cinematography, great writing. The special, Andy Serkis does a truly amazing job. I can't really say enough good things about this film. I have to say that I highly recommend you watch them. It's a lot smarter than most movies I've seen of this genre and this type. It's hard for me to kind of say enough good things about this movie franchise. So I definitely recommend go watch these movies, the first two, and go see War for the Planet of the Apes. So hopefully that kind of got you caught up on the plot and kind of some of the main themes in it. I'll see the movie soon, and there'll be a reaction review about that. I'll talk to you guys later.